Good afternoon. I'm Dr. James Smith Jr., and welcome to the Dr. James Show. Getting ecstatic, excited to be here, excited that you are here as well. We've had people join us from Sweden, Singapore, Malaysia, places I've traveled to teach, and we've had people from right here, local Philadelphia in the United States. You ever meet someone and after you met them and spoke to them for a little bit, you said, I want that person to be in my life for the rest of my life? Well, that's how I feel about today's guest, Norm Wood. And we'll get to Norm shortly, but cannot take this plane up in the air unless I have my co-pilot, Shannon Peck, with me. Shannon, ready for another flight?
Absolutely. Always.
How you be doing? How you be doing?
I'm good. I happen to be doing well after shoveling out another 8 inches of snow this Sunday, but all is well.
You don't have any folks, teenagers around your neighborhood looking to make some money?
I think they're all at school finally. No, it was Super Bowl Sunday. The moms are going to have to drive them, so it becomes a whole thing. But,
Ready for another show? Ready for another show.
Oh, I'm always ready for Tuesdays. Tuesdays are my Fridays, is what I'm trying to say, Dr. James. And I think the guest that we have today, we're all going to learn a little something. And I believe that he has nuggets to offer everyone who's listening and or viewing today. So ladies and gentlemen, as I tell you every week, don't be shy. This is your opportunity for the next hour to have a subject matter expert at your hands. Light up that chat room, make your comments, share with us, ask those questions, and we'll do our best to fit them in within the show. We're excited.
I love it. I love it. I think I'm going to borrow or steal hashtag Thank God It's Tuesday, and I'll be thinking about you when I do it. So let's dive in. Let's dive in. Typically at this point, I share our guest's bio, their title, all those things. But rather than doing that, we're going to show a clip of our guest in action. Let's take a look right now. Norm Wood.
I have a deep-seated feeling of peace, nothing to hide, nothing to fear, nothing to prove. I'm not going to do anything for you, but I do have something to share. What I want to do today is share these with you so that you can create a masterpiece, to broaden your insights and improve your ability to see and feel everything.
Breaking news.
The founder and president of The New Norm Incorporated, a consulting and training group. The New Norm challenges people, companies, and communities.
Discover something that I'm afraid to discover about myself.
That will help me continue to grow on my personal and professional path.
To identify and apply best practices with inclusivity and sustainability.
I think this could be valuable for teams and individuals.
Norm Wood. Norm Wood is a motivational speaker. He is a workshop facilitator. He's a coach. He's an author, and he's also a dear friend. Norm Wood, Mr. Wood, please come on out. Welcome. Glad,
good afternoon.
Ecstatic to have you.
Thank you.
Good. How you doing these days?
Doing fine, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. Good. Norm Wood, the new norm. What's the new norm? What's that about? The new norm.
I get asked that question pretty often, and the answer changes just about like the weather. I started a business after I walked away from the corporate world a couple of years ago, and it was called Triple Bottom Line Concepts. The senior design class at Wake Tech selected several different startups to help them with their marketing efforts. And my first meeting with them, they said, that's an old title. I didn't think it was old. I hadn't known about it that long. They said, can we change the name? I said, sure. I'm in your hands. What would you like to do? And they said, well, can we use your name? I said, yeah, the name is Norm or Norman. My middle initial is E. My initials are NEW, and use it as you like. Well, about 5 minutes later, the new Norm became the name of my company. The new norm actually, it's different today than it was a year ago. It's always in a state of transition. And it's a matter of seizing the opportunity to take advantage of where you are at the moment, to be in the moment, and to learn where you are. Wherever you are, whatever's going on, you're there to learn and grow.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. I remember when we first met, I was at your National Speakers Association chapter. I was the guest speaker. And I did an activity where I taught storytelling, or I taught a way to engage the audience. And I asked for volunteers to come up, and a room full of speakers, but nobody was getting up. Then you got up. You were the first one. And you walked to the front, dropped the mic, sharing the story about when you gave a presentation at a penitentiary. Can you tell us about that story or that experience? I thought it was riveting.
Well, the story I told at that time was the story of getting attracted to and then getting involved in what's called transition. Transition from when you're behind bars to when you're trying to become a part of society. What I discovered was there's an awful lot of supposed safety nets out there, but regardless, when you get out, you got nothing. I've befriended several former inmates, got to know them pretty well. One particular individual, I met him, he had been out for 2 weeks. He got out, he had $40 in his pocket. He didn't have a place to stay. He didn't have, in fact, his family wouldn't even talk to him because he'd been behind bars for 28 years. He had nothing. He lived in a transition home. I spent some time with him, getting to know him. And interestingly enough, one of the first things I told him was, I'm not going to do anything for you. Do not ask for money. You're not going to get it. But I'll be here to support you. And we talk every week. Now, this has been 4 or 5 years ago. One morning I met with him one Saturday morning, and I asked him, what was it he wanted to do? He said, I want to do something with trucks. And I said, you want to be a mechanic or what? He said, no, I want to drive trucks. We pursued that and found out, first of all, he needed to get a driver's license. And his driving record was 13 pages long. About 11 of those pages were failure to appear. When you're in prison in Harnett County, North Carolina, it's rather difficult to appear in court in Cumberland County. He was able to find a lawyer and get the record cleaned up. Then he pursued getting his commercial driver's license. And he's been very much in demand ever since.
Wow.
He's got a lady friend. They're expecting, they had planned to get married, but the pandemic messed that all up.
Norm, what was the motivation behind that? Did you just wake up one morning and say, I want to help people in transition, or was it on your bucket list, or you saw a movie and decided, I want to do that? I mean, what inspired you to do that? It
was really an instant attraction to people that are helpless. And helpless people, I spent a lot of time in my personal ministry with feeding the sheep in homeless shelters and with Step Up Ministry, which some of you may have heard of. About 75% of the Step Up Ministry candidates have criminal records. And I was just drawn to it and realizing that these people they're just like everybody else, just in some cases just with one mistake. It's usually a result of some bad choices, which I must confess I've made some bad choices too.
No.
Yes, but I must tell you right now, the statute of limitations has run out on all the things that I've done.
That's good. That's good. Norm, shortly after I made that presentation, I got something in the mail. The letter said, "Dear Jim, I attended your November workshop in Raleigh, North Carolina. I bought and read both of your books. Thank you for the encouragement and messages your presentation provided. I'm in the early stages of creating speaking, writing, and training career. Your presentation and books gave me a boost, the boost I needed, and the timing was perfect. It appears that we are on the same page in many ways. Please accept the enclosed gift, a copy of my book, The Part That Talks. I hope this will benefit you on your path. Thanks again for your inspiration and encouragement." And that's when I got my book. That made my day, made my year, actually. And it's essentially a spiritual journal where you read every day a scripture and apply it to your life. So thank you very much for that. All right. Lessons learned, Norm, lessons learned. You said your statute of limitation has run out. Let's talk about last year a little bit. A lesson from last year, 2020 pandemic, a lesson learned. Do you have one for us?
Yeah, I have. In fact, I have several. One of the things that I found particularly helpful about last year was I ran out of excuses for doing the things I had been saying I was, one of these days I'll do this, one of these days I'll do
One of these days, yeah.
Particularly things around the home. Also in the group of friends I have that do professional speaking, we decided early on this was not going to go away. We heard 2 weeks, we heard 2 months, we heard 6 months. Meanwhile, the meeting planners, the companies that have big meetings, all those things were going away, at least for a while. And we decided, well, virtual was here to stay. So let's do what we can to become virtual experts. Now there, I'll confess, it's taken me a while because I am, as you've observed, I'm not very tech oriented, but I'm pursuing developing workshops that will be virtual, keynotes that will be virtual. I've also been able to complete, to my satisfaction, 4 keynotes, which can be expanded into day-long or weekend-long workshops. But that's all stuff that I probably would not have taken the time had not I been forced to stay home.
Wow. Wow. Before you share your next one, Shannon, you have a question for Norm, or what's happening in the chat room?
I have a question for Norm. And Norm, the snippet that we opened up with about you had mentioned in your video that you help folks to see and feel everything. Could you share with our listeners and our viewers a little bit about how you actually do that?
Sure. I'll be glad to do that. One of the things as I look back on not only my career, but my life in general, there were those times when I was not enjoying the moment. Staying in the moment is extremely important. The keynote that comes from is entitled "All the World's a Stage." All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. Indeed, the world is a stage, and you're on it. You're on it right now. Everything you do, everywhere you look, you're on the stage, you're being watched, and you're there to watch others. The important thing about being on stage and being in the moment, it's not a dress rehearsal. Take advantage of the moment, learn what you can, learn from your lessons and growth. Whether you, as I said earlier, whether you're up or down, you're there to learn something. I've also learned over the years that when you're down, there's a time coming up, but you're there to learn something so you can really enjoy and take advantage of the time that comes up. Likewise, when you're up, it's real easy when you're on top of the world to think this is it. And that's the time also to learn, because you're not going to be there long. I emphasize that, and we actually have about an hour and a half exercise in identifying those things that we spend a great deal of time in, identifying those things that make you happy, and there's no reason to be sad if you can stay happy. So that's what I emphasize with people, in that it's a workshop that lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And the harder they work on it, the more rewarding it is for them. It's nothing that I impart. It's a self-discovery exercise, or series of self-discovery exercises.
That's good. That's good. Thank you, Shannon. Norm, you help people in transition.
Mm-hmm.
You inspire, you lead. You're very active in your church. You've written books. What motivates you? What motivates you? How does the motivator get motivated?
Well, okay. So and you've already made the comment, and there's nobody in the audience that's going to be surprised to hear that I'm not so much religious as spiritual. That's what motivates me. My daily walk is very important to me, and I expect a miracle most of the time, and they come from all different places. Those things motivate me. Sharing with others, providing a conduit for others to explore their own spirituality. That's something that really excites me. As I mentioned with my friend, his name is Mark. That's where we got acquainted first, and that's how we remain acquainted. And it's been a significant part of my life. And the more I do it, the more I want to do it. You mentioned, of course, I've done Bible study. And one of the reasons I've enjoyed Bible study so much is not because I learned any of the answers, but I've learned a whole lot of the questions. And the more you ask, the deeper you dig, the deeper it is, and the more exciting it becomes. So you ask what excites me, that's it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Question that I want you to fill in the blank with.
Okay.
If it weren't for blank, I wouldn't be here right now. If it weren't for blank, I wouldn't be here. A person, a place, an experience, a situation. If it weren't for blank, fill in the rest.
I'll be glad to. If it weren't for one particularly lowest point in my life, I wouldn't be here.
Let's talk about that.
I was as a young man, I was anxious in pursuing, like my dad did, the executive ranks. I was in an executive position with a mid-sized, high-growth company. We were about 1,500 employees. And they called us the top team. It was the company president, executive vice president, company controller, and me as the head of sales and marketing. I enjoyed contributing to the growth of that company. We grew from about 25 million to nearly 100 million. And being a significant part of that was really exciting for me. And then I noticed one day there was this new guy there in a new position. And I learned that he was there to restructure, reorganize, the drill. And one of his reorganization things was to eliminate my position. That was pretty tough. But he offered me a job as a sales rep in the toughest sales area we had, which was a heavy industrial area. Nobody wanted it, so he gave it to me. Thank you very much. I took the job. I worked very hard. I learned a lot. I surprised myself at how well I performed in that position. And meanwhile, I was on the market. And one day I got a call from my headhunter, and she asked, "You wouldn't think about a position in Detroit, would you?" Well, now, I'm a Southern born and bred, okay? Never lived outside of the South.
Absolutely.
And I thought, in fact, even today, when I tell you this story, it surprises me that my next comment was, "Well, tell me about it." And she did. The interviews were intense. And about a week later, I got a significant offer that I took advantage of. I moved to Detroit. My wife said, "Honey, take advantage of this opportunity if you want to, but I'm not going." So I was there by myself, which enabled me to work all I wanted to. And that was probably one of the more rewarding positions I ever had, First of all, the Detroit market was very similar to that market I had been thrown into as a sales rep. Fortunately, I learned while I was there, so I was able to provide leadership that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. But as I look back, I made some great friends. I got very involved there in Bible study and in the church and in feeding the sheep. And those became things that have followed me the rest of my life as very rewarding pastimes. And that's probably, as I look back, getting the news that my job was gone was pretty bad because we were living the lifestyle. You know, we were living the lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know what it is. And it was expensive, and I had a daughter in college.
Oh, yeah.
All of those things. But as I look back, that's where I learned so much. And one of the things I learned that I use and quote to this day is, you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you won't go.
Nice. Nice. You can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead
Where you won't go.
Nice. Nice. I'm going to borrow a line or a sentence from your previous answer where you talked about along the way, or as you look back. It's Black History Month, and many people are looking back. They're doing research. They're refamiliarizing themselves with Black history. What does Black history or Black History Month mean to you, Norm?
Hey, you got a minute? When I was about 7 years old, let me go back. Let me start. The best way to start that is to remind you of this book. Okay.
I've seen From Average to Awesome before.
Okay. In this book, you mentioned the titans that we encounter throughout our lives, and there were many throughout my life. Some of them younger than me, some older, but there were many that I was able to learn from. But there were two giants. I mean, significant giants. One was my dad. My dad was a rising executive. He worked a lot. He worked very hard, but he always had time for me when I needed it. He was a great example. And even today, when people tell me that when people tell me that I remind them of Bob, I get, the other was, my dad stood 6'5".
Wow.
The other giant stood about 5'5". His name was William. We lived in Atlanta when I was about 7 years old, from the time I was 7 till I was about 12. And we lived in a house in a neighborhood at that time called Buckhead.
Yes, very familiar.
And you've heard of it. And behind our house was a garage, and above the garage was an apartment, a one-room apartment. Now, before I tell you about the man that lived there, I need to also tell you about some other neighbors. One of my neighbors had a cousin that I liked a whole lot, a little girl, whose dad was rich. I mean, he was rich. The first Cadillac I ever saw, and first air-conditioned Cadillac I ever seen. And her dad he owned a very famous restaurant. It's famous even today. And she was rich. Then there was also a guy that lived down the street who caught the bus in front of our house, and he went to a studio where he was on TV. So he was famous. He became even more famous over the years. So I had seen, at ripe old age of 7, I had witnessed rich and famous, and neither one of them seemed to be particularly calling me toward that as a lifelong ambition. And then there was the man that lived above the garage. His name was William. William was an old black gentleman, probably the grandson of American slaves. and I would take him his meals. Today, as I recall those times, I recall walking into that room. It smelled of old books and bleach. William would be sitting in a rocking chair under a lamp beside the window, and he'd usually be reading. And most often, he was reading the Bible. He was a self-taught reader, and we would talk. I mean, there were times as I was growing up, there were things. Now, I was very large for my age, and I had to encounter a lot of bullies. We talked about bullies. We talked about girls. We talked about a lot of life things.
Norm, what made you go up there? What was the inspiration?
Well, first of all, one of my duties was to carry him his meals. And then there were times I wasn't carrying a meal. I would just go up there to talk.
You were going to get fed. You were getting fed.
That was exactly right. He was feeding me in major ways. Everything he owned was in a room about 10 by 10.
Wow.
And yet, he made a far greater, far more lasting impression on me. He was a giant. Far greater impression than the rich and the famous that were right around the corner.
Sure.
To this day, I remember things he told me. I remember he would often, I would start with a question or something, and he would either begin or end or somewhere within his response work in the good book says. One of the final messages he gave me and it was a recurring message, was the good book says, love one another. And he said, young man, it doesn't say you have to agree with one another. It says love one another. And he was an example of that. He was a simple man, a proud man, a humble man. He was the other giant in my life. So what do I think of Black History Month? Well, it means we have all missed a lot. We've missed a lot of wisdom, joy, knowledge, and understanding by neglecting this segment of our population. I encourage everyone to listen, ask, learn, and enjoy learning. Enjoy learning more about the Black culture and the significant unsung contributions they've made to make this a great country.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Shannon, why don't you come on in and join the party?
I love Norm Wood is all I'm going to say. I am obsessed. I'm over here taking notes like I always am. And sometimes what happens to me, Norm, is I forget that I'm helping Dr. James co-host the show because I'm selfishly receiving from all these amazing guests. And you are definitely one of those. And our chat room is lighting up. And in regards to your previous discussion over transition, one of our guests has said sometimes the recognition of needing to pursue it and persist in the transition can be tough. But like you just mentioned, Norm, staying in the moment is so important for growth. Mm-hmm. One of the folks has just repeated what you said and says, whether you're up or down, you're there to learn something so good. And people are agreeing, yes. And again, you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you won't go. And one of the things that your company that I read is responsible for helping organizations identify individuals' strengths and talents. Mm-hmm. In your experience, why do you think there's such a misfiring with an alignment of seeing talent and then folks being aligned with something that just really doesn't maximize their strengths and talents?
Well, my answer to that is there are two reasons. One is ego and the other is greed. And that's usually starting somewhere near the top or in the higher management levels. If you've got a minute, I've got another story. I was assigned an underperforming subsidiary, and when I was with that company I mentioned to you before, and I sat down with the chairman and the CFO, and I asked, I said, what do you want me to do with it? You want me to shut it down? Because it was in that realm where you could shut it down and not miss it because it was not contributing a whole lot. Or do you want me to grow it? And they said, well, Norm, that's up to you. I said, if you're going to leave it up to me, I'm a sales guy, okay? I'm going to grow it. So we put everything on answer phone for a couple of days, left the building, and we went off campus. Prior to that, I did profile testing to understand what the various people's strengths were. And then we met for a day. During that day, first thing we did was after identifying strengths and discussing them openly among ourselves, we realized we had one individual who was in sales and customer service who was highly compliance oriented. She loved detail, but she hated public contact, and literally hated public contact. She was miserable. She became probably the best administrative assistant I ever had.
Nice, nice.
Had another woman who was basically was cut out to be in sales, and we put her in sales, and she did an outstanding job. Long story short, we reorganized, restructured. We reorganized the departments, came up with mission statements by department, an overall mission statement to determine who we were and what our contribution was going to be, and totally reorganized. Nobody was tracking this but me, but I was watching the top line. In a period of 3 years, wait a minute, first we established a 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year plan.
Yeah.
We blew through our 5 year plan in 18 months. At the end of 3 years, we increased top line revenue by 1,400%. Did not add a single person. Spent, I guess I bought lunch a couple of days. That was it. No increase in expenditure. We just reorganized, putting people, as they say, in the right seat on the bus, putting them where they enjoyed doing what they were doing. They came to work happy every day. And more important, they left work happy every day.
Awesome. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shannon. Norm, you a phenomenal story, number one. Mm-hmm. Getting people to work for you because they want to, not because they have to. Mm-hmm. But you talk a lot about helping people get bigger, helping them get bigger. I'm going to show a video clip right now that speaks to that. We're going to show a few words. You were speaking to an audience. Let's take a look at it, and I want you to elaborate.
Okay. Let me set the stage. Learn the lesson, because wherever you are, you're there to learn something. You cannot teach what you don't know, and you cannot lead where you won't go. Think it through. Think big. If that doesn't work, think bigger.
I love it. I love it. I encourage people to jump into their bigness. Mm-hmm. It looks like great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Just saying, if you had any additional thoughts about that, or what goes into your thinking when you encourage people to get bigger, to think bigger, to perform bigger.
Well, it's all too often we think about limitation, and it's a truism: what you think about is going to grow. Yeah. In fact, one of the things I've commented on over the years is when people sit down to do financial planning, or when people sit down to go through a P&L. I guess the P&L is probably the best example. They'll look at that bottom line, and they don't focus on what's making that bottom line. They look at how far that bottom line is from their goals. Yeah. And you know what? That gap grows. If you focus on the positive things, if you focus on growth, but focus on the good things, they will grow too. And that's one of the tips, the comments, the advices, one advice I give to those who are encountering any situation. Look at the limitations and set them aside. Let's forget the limitations for right now. What would you do if, and then I go from there.
Love it, love it, love it. I like to say, what you focus on grows, that thoughts become things, and that energy and action follow thought.
Absolutely.
Our mindset is so powerful. Do you talk about those type of factors in your book? Talk to us about the book, the part that talks.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I will tell you, first I'm going to tell you where the book came from.
Yeah, please.
In 1986, my dad passed away. I've already told you what he meant to me. We were supposed to get together on a Saturday, and my mom called and told me that he wasn't waking up. He had passed away. And my dad and my daughter were very close, and we decided that it was important for our daughter to have closure. So we arranged for a private viewing the next night at the funeral home. And I recall now, as we walked into that room, the casket, the open casket was all the way across the room, and our daughter went running across to see her papa. She started pulling his fingers and pinching his nose, and about that time we got closer, and she said, "He's cold." And right away, my wife, doing the mother's duty, started explaining to her about what happens to the soul when we pass away. I was not aware of it at the time, but my wife had very, very limited experience of even being around death, much less standing next to a corpse. My 5-year-old daughter quickly grasped that and responded with the truth of, "Oh, that's the part that talks." So that's where the title came from. The part that talks is our spirit. Several years later, I was taking a social media course at Wake Tech, and one of the requirements of that course was to create a blog. So I started a blog entitled "The Part That Talks," and I did that for 3 or 4 years. And people that, I had subscribers say, you need to put this in a book. So that's what you see there. The editing, I had to reduce about 7 years worth of what I would do. I'd read a Bible verse in the morning, and then I'd meditate on what that Bible verse had said to me, and I'd do my journaling. And so you've got excerpts from my journaling, and then you've got Bible verses. And it took about a year to finish, and we came close to the end, and my editor said, it would be nice to put some questions in here. And so I thought, we could do a question a week. Well, then I'd have to go back and rewrite so that all of the readings would be applicable to that question. So I set aside a little bit of time to start thinking up some questions, and I came up with about 400 questions. So in fact, as people comment on the book, that's the thing they tend to comment on most. They were good questions. They're the questions that came to me. They're questions I wanted to answer for myself, and they help people. There are times that people will read those questions and they'll say, "All right, now you're ceasing to preach and starting to cry." But that's the intent.
That's awesome. Norm, having written books myself, I know that books can be a journey. They can be challenging. They can be rewarding. You go through something during the course of the process. What was most exhilarating for you in writing the book? And what did you find challenging as you were writing the book?
The big challenge, first of all, was just making myself do it. The writing was done. I had to edit it. A friend of mine said, just set aside 30 minutes. Well, everybody can find 30 minutes. So I set aside 30 minutes, And that 30 minutes turned into an hour and then 2 hours. And before long, I was into it. And I was able to, on a regular basis, say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to set aside 30 minutes to get through. And you know what I'm talking about, getting through, getting something down. Exhilarating, probably the thing that was most exciting was the cover, because it's coming, it's here. You know, it's really happening. And I enjoyed going through selecting the site, selecting the pictures and so forth. And that was probably the most exciting part.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Looking forward to your next one. I want to move to a segment of our show where one that we call the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a segment where I ask the guest, I ask you, or I give you a word or a couple words. And I'd like for you to share what comes to mind in one word. And it's not an activity where you think to talk.
Mm-hmm.
You just bam, bam. And we'll do several. You're on the hot seat, Norm Wood. You're on the hot seat. Here's your first word. Respect. You're thinking. You
just want one word?
One word, bam. Yeah.
Woman.
Resiliency.
Sports.
Confidence.
Challenge.
Dad. You're thinking.
Lead.
I'm sorry?
Lead.
Soul.
Feeling.
Black History Month.
The proper name, Mark.
Sorry?
Mark. That's the name of a friend of mine.
Yeah. The new norm.
Challenge.
Authenticity.
Honesty.
Vulnerability.
Honesty.
Leadership.
Discomfort.
I love it. Norm Wood, you are off the hot seat. You're off the hot seat. Shannon, why don't you come on out and what's happening where you're living right now?
Well, inquiring minds want to know two quick questions. What are the keys to being an effective leader? And what are the keys to successfully running a multi-million-dollar organization?
All right.
So keys to be an effective leader and then successfully running a multi-million-dollar organization.
That's one of my next books. I was asked to speak to a group about leadership. And so I went out and bought the latest book about leadership by the latest guru. And I went through it and I thought, I've been doing this for 40 years. Why is this all new? And I finally, after reading through that and then digesting, okay, what does all of this mean? I came up with leadership is a 4-letter word. You're either a love-based leader or a fear-based leader. The most successful leaders tend to be love-based in that they honor and respect their employees. And respect and honoring doesn't mean being soft touch. Being respectful could mean telling somebody it's time for them to move on. I will say that in my career spanning over 50 years, I've only terminated 3 people's employment, and one of those was sexual harassment, another was drug related, in which I had no choice. But that first one, I had to do it. And I think I realized that after I did it, that man's life turned around. And the job was holding him down, essentially. So I've never hesitated to approach that subject with people. They just need to know that I'm serious. So I guess the keys to running a successful organization Number one, be sure everybody's on the right seat on the bus. And number two, honor and respect your employees for who they are, for what they are, and be sure they know good communication is another. One of my favorite sayings is, in most relationships, difficulties are a result of lack of expectations being met. Most often, those expectations were never communicated. So be sure you communicate clearly, respond to others with respect and love, and that's basically that. Those are the things, because leading a multi-million-dollar organization is not that difficult if everybody is doing their part.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Awesome.
Norm, you talked earlier about transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
And for many of us, last year was one huge transition or pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are afraid to do that. They're apprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
They settle for being stuck.
Mm-hmm.
They don't embrace uncertainty or ambiguity. They want things to line up just right.
Mm-hmm.
You indicated that you were in sales for a number of years. How did you transition into being a speaker, doing Toastmasters, National Speakers Association? How did that happen?
Well, first of all, the speaking was something I've done pretty much as a hobby all along. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed training, and so it was a pretty natural transition. In fact, more than anything, it was an opportunity to start devoting my life to doing something I really love doing: speaking, training, and then of course the natural next step was to work toward writing, and that's been a challenge, but I enjoy doing that also.
I love speaking. I could not imagine doing anything else for a career. What do you like about it? What moves you? What inspires you to give those messages of hope and bigness? And yeah.
I taught school for 3 years right out of college. And I think that the best description there of what really inspires, you're standing there in front of a classroom talking to 35 and you see one get it. That aha, learning is taking place. That's what thrills me. And particularly when I see that individual either make a change or pursue what they're doing or whatever, they've received some little bit of encouragement or some lesson from something I said, and they then do something with it. So that's what I get a real thrill.
How would you describe your style, your approach, and how much has it changed or evolved over the years? Your style and approach to speaking, to inspiring, to educating, your style, and how much has it evolved? I'm a storyteller. I believe facts fade, stories stick. I'm going to move you through story, and I'm going to create an experiential time for you. I want you to be as tired as I am after my presentation is over. So it's physical presenting, storytelling. How about yours, and how much has it evolved over the years?
I'm a storyteller, and I'll tell you, I thoroughly enjoy watching speakers and learning from what they do. Like you, you're a great storyteller. I picked up a lot just watching you. I enjoy telling a story, and that's probably, if there has, what evolution has been there, has been learning from others how to tell a story better.
That's good. That's good. When we teach storytelling, we have what we call our FISH model, and that is the I standing for I, the participant. I need to F, feel your message, S, see your message, and H, hear your message. And the H is not around the audio or the volume. it's a deeper understanding, a deeper meaning for what you're conveying to the audience. So we have that in common as well. Norm, what's next for you? 2021 and beyond? What goals? What are you working on? What you doing in that lab as the mad scientist?
Well, the two things right now, the book, one book, Leadership is a Four-Letter Word, that's in progress. The other book, which is, I plan to have that out first, is I told you about William. That there is a story, it's just the wisdom of William. And that one's, it's outlined and partially scripted. And that's going to be a significant project for me. Those two things are things I want to do. Other than that, I really want to enhance my speaking business through the virtual presence. I'm working on that. I'm actually working on completing a studio in the space you see me in right here.
Norm, if people wanted to find out more information about you or get a copy of the book and then get ready to get the future books, where can they go?
Okay, the book is available on Amazon. I checked that yesterday to be sure it could be purchased. It has not been a bestseller, but that's okay. That's not why I wrote it. The book is available on Amazon. It's The Part That Talks by Norman E. Wood. And of course, I can be contacted on The New Norm. That's my website. It's thenewnorminc.com. There's a lot of new norms out there. I'm the one that's incorporated under thenewnorminc.com. So those are the best ways to get in touch.
Norm, we've seen a lot over the last year and a half, I guess. The pandemic started trending in March. And throughout your career, I'm sure you've experienced a lot. What does this world need right now in terms of what's happening politically, what's happening from a civil standpoint, from a humanities standpoint, from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint? I mean, there's so much bubbling up right now. What does the world need, in your opinion?
Well, I don't want to sound trite, but there was a song, what the world needs now is love. And love makes the world go around, and that's what it needs. If we could just rid the world of greed and power happy and selfishness, and people would love one another and look at one another in ways that, what is there with this person, about this person to appreciate? You know, I've met, and I'm sure you all have, people that were difficult to like. But in many cases, there was something there to like. And I think that's something we need to do. As far as political, I've got to tell you, I'm sick of it all. I'm just absolutely sick of it all. There's so many egos out there. And I think we're going to see lots of change. I just have to remind myself of who is in control. And then I'm fine.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Norm, at this point in our show, we have another segment, and it's called the Mini, M-I-N-I, the Mini Keynote. Again, I'm a speaker, you're a speaker, so this should be right up your alley. We asked our guests, give us a 30-second keynote on whatever they want, whether it's empowerment, whether it's pivoting, whether it's leadership. It's your call to action, your challenge, your admonition for the folks who have tuned in today. You have 30 seconds to just lean in like you're holding the mic and you're looking into the audience, whether it's virtual or in person, and give them words from Norm Wood.
Act 2, Scene 7 from his play, As You Like It, William Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Indeed, all the world is a stage, and you're on it. I'm going to offer you advice in 3 acts. Act 1, always learn the lesson and grow. Act 2, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're there to grow. Take advantage of it and learn. And Act 3, you never know who is in the audience. Pardon me, Act 1 was always give it your best. Act 2, always learn the lesson and grow. And Act 3, You never know who is in the audience. I give an example there of William and his wife could not find a hotel room that night in Philadelphia because of a convention in town. They looked at all the finer, more expensive hotels, and they were all full. So they stopped in at a smaller hotel, which was also full, but the manager, George, offered them his own quarters for the night. William was so impressed with George's kindness, generosity, and customer focus that he invited George to come to New York for a meeting. William Waldorf Astor, enlisted George Vogt, as the founding proprietor of his hotel, his new hotel in New York City, the Waldorf Astoria. You never know who is in the audience.
Bam, mic drop, Shannon. You never know who's in the audience.
You never know who's in the audience. And the new norm, as you said when you opened up today, is ever changing. And folks are feeling that, I'm sure, that are listening, who we can't hear because they're not live in the show right now, but I've really enjoyed your story today. Fish, feel, individual, see, hear. Folks are in agreement with everything you're saying. Love that. But for me personally, Mr. Wood, I want to say, with your new norm being ever changing, I want to thank you for giving leaders, managers, people the permission to be kind and love in spite of your role and responsibility in an organization, because it doesn't represent weakness. It represents a strength and a unity. So I want to thank you for giving us the rite of passage today to have a new norm, Dr. James. That's what I'm taking away from today. Not only to be present, but to have a new norm that no matter what position I hold as mom, wife, coworker, co-host, you've given me the permission, and our viewers and listeners today, to wear your heart on your sleeve. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong.
Norm, thank you. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the alumni. This relationship started in November of 2019, and I hope it never ends. I appreciate what you do, how you plus me, and what you bring to our life, and what you shared again today. So thank you for that, Shannon. Thank you, Norm. Another wonderful show. I hope you are walking away with tools and pearls. I also want to remind you that February 23rd, 24th, and 25th, we are doing our virtual boot camp. If you have a few minutes, I encourage you to stay on. We have our video, which talks about the boot camp, so stay on for a couple of minutes. But again, another wonderful show. Flew by. Another thank God it's Tuesday. Use the tools, have fun, and continue to grow through life and not just go through life. And don't forget, you've just been Gym-Pacted.